Hello, dear traveler. Take a deep breath and gently close your eyes. Let the day's worries drift out with the tide. Listen to the hush of the wind, the lapping of waves against worn wooden hulls, and the distant cry of seabirds over dark waters. You're safe here. You're warm. You're resting now, tucked beneath a thick woolen blanket in a long house warmed by firelight, with the scent of salt and pine lingering in the air. Now, let me tell you a story. Our story today sets sail at the edge of the known world, where jagged fjords plunge into the icy deep and mornings rise heavy with fog and fish guts. This is the Viking coast, and it is not for the faint of heart. In a Norse fishing village, you don't wake up, you're pulled awake. The cold does it first, seeping through gaps in the timber walls, stiffening your knees before your eyes have opened. Then the smell salt, herring brine, and the lingering soot of yesterday's peat fire. The fire's out. Of course it is. Fuel is scarce. You rise in darkness. Outside, the wind is already speaking. Your hands fumble for your boots, crusted with mud and fish oil. You are 16 winters old, and today, like every day, you must feed your family. Not in words, but in that ancient Norse voice. Long groans across the sea, low whispers in the thatched roof. Nets lie beside her, stiff and tangled, every knot a curse, frozen in place. You load the gutting knife, bait bucket, and oars. No food, just the tools. A mesh of writhing silver breaks the surface scot, wriggling wild-eyed, tangled like spirits, trying to escape the underworld. The waves are gnawing at the frozen shore like hungry wolves. You step into raw wool your tunic, stiff from yesterday's salt. The boat waits. Below the cliff she's, called Storm Sister, lashed to a birch post and coated with rime. You slice, hands numb and slick with blood. The fish stare at you, mouths open, eyes glassy. Their smell coats your skin, your clothes, your soul. Your stomach growls like a thing alive. It will stay that way until sundown. If the catch is poor, maybe longer. The tide, like a Viking god, wants you dead. With two others, your cousin and your father's old friend. Push the boat out. She says nothing, but her eyes say everything. You'll eat tonight. Not meat, not bread, not feast but soup, fish head, barley, onion, seawater. The tide is low, the current stubborn. Salt spray slaps your face like an insult. You do not flinch. Weighted by stone, they vanish into the black below. You wait. The sea waits longer. Out at sea, the cold deepens. It bites through the layers. It burns. Your hands become claws. The nets go out. The sky remains the color of iron for hours. Then something pulls. Something fights. You haul, slowly, together. Success. You laugh, a little. Breath steaming in the wind. But it is not over. The gutting comes next. You row back. Wind against you. Progress is slow. But land returns. Eventually. And with it, smoke, warmth. The village inside the longhouse. You drop the catch at your mother's feet. Your reward then net wood-splitting, gut disposal. There is no rest, only the knowledge that tomorrow you'll do it again. Did it barefoot on frost-covered shores. Because in a Viking fishing village, survival is not heroic. It's habitual. It's in your calluses, your cough, your creaking joints. And it is winter 9 months of the year. Are your eyes getting heavy now? Good. Let the rhythm of the waves rock you. Let the crackle of the hearth in your mind's ear lull you deeper. But before sleep claims you fully, there's another tale I must tell you. One of a woman too wise for her time and too brave to stay on land. Our next tale floats like a long ship on memory's tide. Not every Viking was a raider. Not every leader bore a beard and axe. Some shaped history with quiet fire. And one, her name was Aud. Aud the deep-minded, born of noble blood daughter to Kettle Flatness hers, was a life wrapped in oaths, honor, an ocean mist. But even as a girl, she heard the water call, not with violence, but with vision. When her warrior husband died abroad and her son fell in battle across the sea, the world told her, grieve quietly, stay still. But Aud did not. She listened instead to the wind, and the wind whispered, build. So she did, not with hammer and nail, but with command, with wisdom. She commissioned a ship in Secreta Nair, deep-bellied for the waves of the North Atlantic. At night, beneath the light of distant stars, she packed it with kin and cattle, bondsmen and freedmen, and she sailed from Caithness to Orkney, from Shetland to the Faroes, from grief to greatness. They called her mad, a widow, a woman, an old soul, but the sea favored her. Storms parted, currents carried, and when the coast of Iceland emerged from the fog like a sleeping beast, she claimed it with her own hands. She marked the land. She offered gifts to the gods, yes, but she also preached a new faith, a quiet one, a whisper of the white Christ. Long before his name was known in the fjord, she built longhouses. She freed her slaves. She raised a cross on the hill. And she held feasts, not for power, but for peace. At her table, oaths were taken gently. And when she died, some say standing upright, noble and unafraid, she was buried like a queen. In a ship, beneath the earth, sailed into legend. Aud, the deep-minded, a woman of war and water, a weaver of destiny on wave and wind. So, as you drift now, deeper into rest, imagine the swell of her ship beneath your back, the stars above you, the salt breeze on your cheeks. Let her courage wrap around you like a woolen cloak, warm, enduring, ancient, because not all journeys are loud. Some, like hers, are silent, unstoppable tides. Still with me, dreamer? There's more yet to uncover, but only if you're ready for something darker now, beyond the veil of mist. Something that waits where the dead do not rest easy. You're still here. Good. Snuggle deeper now. Pull your blanket up to your chin, because the next part of our tale is cold and strange. It drifts in like mist from the fjords, slow, eerie, patient. Now, close your eyes, and do not open them, even if you feel something standing at the end of your bed. It's said that when a Viking dies at sea, he does not always stay there. Not if he was greedy, not if he cursed the waves with his final breath, not if his eyes, even in death, stayed open. In the dark corners of Norse folklore, there's a word. It means again walker, not a ghost. No, not a shade with bones soaked in seawater, but a corpse with a beard still dripping with rage in its breathless chest. The village elders warned of them in winter, when the fog rolled in low and thick like spilled cream, when the fish grew scarce and the dogs howled toward nothing. That's when they said the Draugr came walking out of the tide pools, through the cracks in the stones, up from graves that should have stayed sealed beneath barnacled rocks. You could smell one before you saw it. Rot and brine, salted death. Some said they came for their stolen treasure. Others claimed they just hated the living, because breath and warmth and joy were things they no longer had. One tale tells of a fisherman named Olaf, a boy who laughed too loudly, who mocked the sea. He once stole a coin from a drowned sailor's belt, a small silver disc, slick with kelp. He wore it around his neck, proud as a young, until the tide rose fast one night, and Olaf disappeared. They found his body days later, but his eyes were open, and the coin was gone. Since then, people say they hear footsteps outside their long house after dark. Heavy, wet, not pacing, just waiting. The Draugr cannot be killed with steel. Axes pass through them like wind through reeds. You must outwit them. Trap them in salt circles. Bury them with iron spikes in their mouths. Or, as some whisper, Sing them to sleep with lullabies older than stone. They fear the sun, they hate bells, and they never forget a face. Now, dear listener, if your heart ever goes cold without reason, if you wake and find damp footprints on your floor, don't open the door, don't look out the window, don't say their name. Just listen to the wind outside and pray that it carries them away. You're safe now. You're here with me, in warmth, in calm, in the hush of sleep. Let the shadows fade from your mind. Let your breath slow like the still water at dawn. Because for our final tale tonight, we'll leave the cold and walk into firelight, into the hall of a yard, where mead flows thick and secrets are kept beneath toasts. Ah, you've stayed. Good. You've braved the sea, the sorrow, and even the dead. Now, come in from the cold. Step into the longhouse. Feel the warmth against your skin. Smell the roasted meat, the sweet fermented honey rising in wooden cups. This is no place for toil or fear tonight, is where power whispers beneath the laughter. The longhouse is alive. Its timbers grown with age, thick with stories. Smoke curls upward through the rafters, carrying the scent of spiced ale and pine tar. Lamps made from whale oil flicker along the walls, and a dozen voices weave together into one warm, wordless hum. You enter quietly, ducking beneath the low arch, breath still tasting of cold. Here, in this place, warmth wraps around you like fur, and so does silence, the reverent kind when all eyes shift to the Jarl at the head of the table. He doesn't stand, he doesn't need to. Broad-shouldered eyes like a hawk's. In winter, his presence commands the room more than any sword. A ring of silver bands his brow simple, but unmistakable. This is a man whose voice ends arguments, whose word binds families. And tonight, he is smiling, because this is a feast night. Roasted lamb crackles on spits, wooden bowls brim with buttery root stew, platters of dried fish, black rye, and baked apples pass from hand to hand. But the true drink of power here is mead, golden, thick, and humming with fermented magic. It's poured into curved horn cups. One by one, guests rise to offer toasts not just of thanks, but of intent. A young warrior stands cup raised. He swears an oath to guard the coast from raiders, even if it costs his blood. His hand trembles slightly. He is heard. He is accepted. Next, an old widow toasts her daughter's hand fasting, offering tokens of spun wool and sweet berries. She speaks softly, but the room listens. Because words at a Jarl's feast are not just words. They are currency. They are future. Then the skald, the poet, rises. His voice cuts through the chatter like harp strings in snow. He tells of a battle past where the Jarl stood alone, shield shattered, yet unbroken. The hall fills with murmurs. The tale is not just for glory. It is a reminder. Power is not given here. It is earned. And it must be remembered. As the fire burns lower, the mood shifts. Laughter grows looser. Eyes grow heavy. And under the table, alliances are whispered soft promises beneath louder ones. You hear hushed plans for trade with the Sami. Rumors of a Christian priest in the south. Someone mentions iron. Someone else mentions betrayal. But no one speaks these things loudly. Not here. Not tonight. Because at a Jarl's feast, you feast not just on food, but on reputation, on loyalty, on the fragile, flickering balance of men and gods. Then, when bellies are full and mugs drain dry, the Jarl himself rises. He says few words, only this: winter is long, but together we burn bright. And with that, the feast ends, quietly, powerfully, as all things must. You return to your furs, full, safe, changed. Now, dear listener, let the music fade. Let the fire grow dim behind your eyelids. Let your breath fall in rhythm with the earth beneath you. You've seen the sea, heard the sagas, felt the cold, the power, the fear, and the firelight. And yet, here you are, still, resting, home. This was only the beginning. Still with me. You're drifting beautifully. Now, let yourself sink even deeper. Your body heavy as stone, your mind soft as sea foam, and your heart still pulsing with ancient rhythm. Tonight, the stories don't end. They deepen. We return now to the Viking fishing village, not just to survive, but to understand. Imagine this. You step outside your longhouse at dawn, and before your feet even touch the frosted earth, it hits you, the smell. This village, this cluster of damp roofs and smoke-burping chimneys, it lives on odor. It breathes it. It sweats it. The first layer is always smoke, not fragrant. No, this isn't the woody incense of crackling pine. It's damp peat and sheep dung, blackening the air with bitter fog. It seeps into the wool of your cloak, into your hair, into your breath. Then comes fish. Always the fish, dried, salted, freshly gutted, hurrying strung like damp flags on lines between huts. Eel skins hung over wooden racks, aroma sweet at first, then sour, then something like decay. You live with it. You become it. There's human sweat, too. Days between washes. Thick furs, worn too long. Labor without pause. Men smell of leather and fire. Women of churned butter and flax. Children, muddy feet, and milk. You catch the tang of blood not from violence, but from the daily tasks. Goat slaughter, gutting fish, a smear here, a drip there. No one flinches. It's just life. There's salt in everything, crusted under your nails, coating your lips, woven into the cloth of your tunic like invisible frost. You taste it even in your sleep. The toilets are holes in the ground, shared by many, emptied rarely. Chamber pots, slosh beside beds. Not romantic, not clean, but real. A village of bodies, breathing, sweating, surviving, and yet, amid the stench, there are strange moments of sweetness. A waft of honey from the mead jar. Juniper berries bubbling in stew. The herbal balm your mother rubs into your sore hands, made from pine resin and goose fat. A sprig of dried lavender tucked in a girl's braid. A clove of garlic burned for luck. These are the notes that rise above the muck. Small, human acts of defiance, of care, of beauty. So when you think of the Viking Age, don't just see the ships and swords. Smell it, live it, feel it crawling into your lungs and settling there like fog. And as you sleep tonight, maybe part of you will still be in that village, wrapped in the musk of salt and smoke, knowing that even the worst smells can carry the soul of survival. Rest easy now. Wonder, you've breathed the air of a lost world, and it has not turned you away, but the tailies keep flowing like glacial melt through mountain stone. Good. Still calm. Still drifting. You're doing so well. Now deeper still. Like sinking into moss, into myth, into the marrow of a world long gone, but not forgotten. Let's return. The sea is waiting. This next tale is not in the sagas. No skald sang it over fire. No runestone bears her name. But in one forgotten village, there are still whispers of the girl who vanished with the tide. Her name was Runa, the youngest daughter of a fisherman. Bright eyes, sea-colored, and a voice that sang even while gutting cod. She had no brothers, only sisters, older, already married off to men with nets and strong backs. But Runa, she didn't want nets, she wanted the sea. She'd rise before dawn just to watch it, knees tucked under her chin. She'd sit on the cold rocks, watching the mist roll in. The waves collapse and pull back like breath. She said she could hear it speaking, in clicks, in sighs, in deep, distant groans, like a sleeping god, dreaming below. The elders said she was odd, touched, maybe, but harmless. She sang to the seals. She left berries on the stones for the sea spirits. And once she dove in fully clothed, just to feel what the herring felt. Then one morning, she was gone. The tide had risen fast the night before. A storm rolled through, quick and cruel. When the villagers found her footprints, they led down to the water, not back. Her father searched until his skin split from cold. Nothing. Only the sea. But that night, the herring ran thicker than ever. So many fish that the nets nearly tore. It fed the whole village for a week. Some said it was Runner's doing, that she gave herself to the tide, that the sea had claimed her, not as punishment, but as kin. In the years that followed, fishermen swore they saw her, just before a storm, standing waist-deep in the foam, hair wild, eyes wide, or swimming far from shore, skin pale and glowing. She was no longer Runa. She was something else. And once a year, on the night the tide rose highest, the villagers left offerings, not to Odin, not to Thor, but to her, a carved herring, a comb, a song whispered by the wind, because deep down they knew the sea had taken her, but it had also kept her. And sometimes it gave her back. So if you're ever near the Norse coast on a foggy night, and you hear a girl's voice, soft as sea foam, singing from somewhere you cannot see, do not answer. Just listen and leave something small on the rocks. A shell, a song, a piece of yourself. Let your thoughts drift like seaweed now, weightless, floating in cool, gentle darkness. Because the next story is older still. A tale of gods, not from above, but from beneath. You're doing beautifully. Heavier now, floating and sinking all at once. The deeper you go, the older it gets. Stone, salt, story. Some truths are buried, not because they are forgotten, but because they are watched. Ready, dear dreamer? Then let us descend, far below the nets, deeper than the oars reach, below the whales, below the wrecks. There is a place in the sea where sound does not return. The old Norsemen knew this. They didn't speak of it lightly. They didn't chart it on maps. Instead, they warned children in whispers. Do not sail when the water is too still. Do not cast nets too far. And if the sea suddenly blooms with fish roll the other way, because sometimes plenty is a trap, and the creature they feared most didn't roar. It waited. The Kraken, not a name, but a word for something unspeakable. An eye the size of a man's shield. Tentacles longer than a hunger as old as the fjords themselves. The story said it slept for years, decades even. Then, one day, the birds would vanish. The currents would go slack, and bubbles huge ones would rise from the depths like dying breaths. Then it would wait, its back breaking the sea like an island, its mouth unseen, but felt a pull not just of water, but of will, a gravity. And down would go the ship, without trace. The Kraken didn't hate men. It didn't even notice them. It just fed, slowly, endlessly. Some skalds said it guarded the gates to another world, that its tentacles were tied to the roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree, that killing it would undo the oceans. Others believed it was a god's punishment for those who thought the sea could be tamed. But there was one tale, a quiet one, of a single fisherman who lived. He returned alone, eyes clouded, hair gone white. He said he saw its eye beneath the boat, a single, lidless eye, not cruel, not kind, just awake, older than time. He said he whispered to it, and it heard, and it let him go. No one believed him, but they never fished past that point again. To this day, sailors still feel it. When the compass spins, when the air thickens, when the water below suddenly turns black, They say the kraken still dreams, and when it stirs, the tides shudder. So if you ever find yourself at sea, and the fish are too easy to catch, and the sky is too clear, and the silence feels wrong, row. Don't look down. Don't speak. Just row. The water's still now. Let that fear back into the dark. You're safe. You're warm. And the kraken slumbers elsewhere. Now, shall we return to the firelight for another tale? Come closer now. The sea has receded, leaving only steam on the hearthstones, and in its place, shadows. Not the kind cast by flame, but the ones behind your eyes when you dream. Now open your heart just enough to hear the tale of what Vikings feared, not on water, but in the silence after battle. In the Viking world, words weren't just words. They were weapons. They were locks. They were the thread that wove men into fate. And nothing was stronger than an oath. Oaths weren't made lightly. Not after too much mead. Not in jest. They were made with blood, with spit, with pieces of a man's soul. Some oaths were bound in public at the thing. The great gathering, where law and land and vengeance were spoken aloud. Others were made in secret, whispered in graveyards, etched into tree bark, or pressed into skin with ash and iron. To break an oath was to unmake yourself. Your name would rot, your luck would turn, and worse still, your afterlife would vanish. For the Vikings believed that to enter Valhalla, the hall of the brave, one must die honorably, and to break an oath was to die alone. There was once a farmer named Geir, not a warrior, not a noble, just a man with a field, a wife, and a stubborn goat. His neighbor, Cole, had a quarrel over land. Their fields overlapped by a finger's width. But to Cole, that finger meant challenge. He demanded a duel. Geir refused. He offered peace, goats, silver. But Cole spat. He swore an oath. By Odin's one eye, I will see you dead before the next snow. Geir laughed. It was just a man's rage, he thought. Empty thunder. But oaths are never empty. Snow fell early that year, and with it came the axe. Cole killed Geir just outside the smokehouse. But something followed him home. For 7 nights, Cole heard scratching at his door. Not loud, just steady, as if someone were dragging their fingers across the wood. His goats blew. His fire would not stay lit, and in his dreams, Geir stood silent, eyes full of sadness, not anger. On the 8th night, Cole went mad. He confessed to no one, to the air, to the gods. Then he disappeared into the forest. They found his body months later, face down in a stream, a carving knife clutched in his frozen fist. Some say Geir cursed him. Others say the gods took his soul for oath-breaking. But the villagers knew the truth. When you make a vow, you do not own it anymore. It owns you. Even today, in Iceland, the old stones remain, with names carved deep, and blood once spilled in the grooves. So if you ever feel the urge to swear a promise under stars, bite your tongue, spit 3 times, and think carefully. Because in the Viking world, an oath is forever, even if you are not. Now sleep gently, Oathkeeper. You are not bound. You are not hunted. You are only listening, floating, safe. And if you still crave one more tale before true rest, you've come far now, through mist, through memory, and still, you drift deeper, as if the stories are pulling you not downward, not upward, but inward. The next tale, it doesn't belong to one place. It was carried in pockets, sewn into sails, buried in the hearts of those who left, and those who stayed. Let's follow them. Long before maps had edges, long before the compass needle quivered at the pull of north, the Vikings sailed past what they knew. They sailed into fog, into whispers, into seas that others feared even to name. And in one such journey, they found something that changed their songs forever. Geir laughed. It was just a man's rage, he thought. Empty thunder. But oaths are never empty. Snow fell early that year, and with it came the axe. Cole killed Gaia, just outside the smokehouse. But something followed him home. For 7 nights, Cole heard scratching at his door. Not loud, just steady, as if someone were dragging their fingers across the wood. His goats blew. His fire would not stay lit, and in his dreams, Gaia stood silent, eyes full of sadness, not anger. On the 8th night, Cole went mad. He confessed to no one, to the air, to the gods. Then he disappeared into the forest. They found his body months later, face down in a stream, a carving knife clutched in his frozen fist. Some say Gaia cursed him. Others say the gods took his soul for oath-breaking. But the villagers knew the truth. When you make a vow, you do not own it anymore. It owns you. Even today, in Iceland, the old stones remain, with names carved deep, and blood once spilled in the grooves. So if you ever feel the urge to swear a promise under stars, bite your tongue, spit 3 times, and think carefully. Because in the Viking world, an oath is forever, even if you are not. Now sleep gently, Oathkeeper. You are not bound. You are not hunted. You are only listening, floating, safe. And if you still crave one more tale before true rest, you've come far now, through mist, through memory, and still, you drift deeper, as if the stories are pulling you not downward, not upward, but inward. The next tale, it doesn't belong to one place. It was carried in pockets, sewn into sails, buried in the hearts of those who left, and those who stayed. Let's follow them. Long before maps had edges, long before the compass needle quivered at the pull of north, the Vikings sailed past what they knew. They sailed into fog, into whispers, into seas that others feared even to name. And in one such journey, they found something that changed their songs forever. Vinland, the land of wine, the land of promise. It wasn't like home. There were no black cliffs or biting winds, no icy tongues licking the shore. Vinland had trees so tall they touched the mist, rivers fat with fish that never fled, and berries so many berries, bursting red and gold, that the Norse thought the soil must be enchanted. They said the grass smelled sweeter, that the stars looked different, that the birds didn't fear man. Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red, was the one who led them. They say he was born for water. Could hear the wind before it turned, could read the sea like a story. When his ship touched Vinland's shore, he didn't claim it, he listened to it. The men built huts. They traded. They thrived for a while. But paradise never lasts. Not for long. Soon the land spoke back, not with thunder or flood, but with silence. With shapes in the trees, with shadows that watched. The local Skrellingar, the Norse called them, did not speak the same tongue, did not eat the same meat, did not want visitors. Tension curled through the forests, and though the Norse were warriors, they were far from home. Too few, too far. They left, but they remembered, and when they returned to Greenland, they told tales of Vinland, of sun that lasted long, of forests that whispered, of a land just beyond the sea, just beyond reach, where you could start again. Some believe Vinland was Newfoundland. Some think it was only a dream, a ghost of green in a sailor's starving mind. But ask an old wind-blown fisherman on the western coast of Iceland, and he'll tell you, Vinland is real. It calls to those who've lost everything. It waits for those bold enough to listen to the waves, and it remembers every footstep. So if you ever sail west, and the gulls vanish, and the breeze turns sweet, you may be near. Speak softly and leave something behind, something small, so Vinland knows you came in peace. Sleep now, explore. You've touched the edge of the world and found it soft, green, and strange. There's more, if you wish. Still sailing with me, dreamer. You're doing beautifully. Your breath is the tide now. In and out. Soft and steady. The shore is far behind. The stars are above. And the next tale lies beneath your feet. A tale not of warriors or witches, but of something quieter and colder. The Viking Age was not made of iron. Not truly. It was made of contrast, of flame and frost, of wool and snow, of breath and blizzard. Survival wasn't carved by swords. It was chiseled through ice. Imagine winter, but not the kind you know. Not sleet, or flurries, or scarves. Imagine a night that lasts 3 months, where the sun becomes a rumor, where the wind cuts sideways, through bone and thatch, where silence isn't peaceful. It's a warning. In this world, your hearth is your heart. Your fire isn't for comfort, it's for existence. So how did they survive? They mastered the balance between cold and heat. Every longhouse had its center, the fire pit, dug low into stone. It burned day and night, fed with peat, driftwood, bones if needed. They'd bank the fire each evening, covered in ash, so it slept but did not die. Like an ember, waiting. Children were taught to tend flame before they learned to speak. A dropped coal could mean death. A weak fire meant frostbite, but they couldn't waste heat either. The smoke was sacred. It dried the meat. It cured the fish. It smoked the hides. It warmed the rafters, where people slept on platforms above the goats. And the ice, it was enemy and ally. Rivers froze, so they made sleds, carved from pine, dragged by dogs or stubborn men. They shaped ice blocks into crude walls, shielding the wind. They dug deep storage pits holes in the frozen ground, lined with moss, to keep fish from spoiling and mead from bursting. Their boots were stuffed with straw. Their cloaks were double-layered, soaked in seal oil. They packed snow into the chinks of the walls to seal the house, turning ice into insulation, making winter their prisoner. And still, some years, they lost. Entire villages buried in white silence. Children fading in their sleep. Old men walking into the woods, barefoot, singing. Not madness, just mercy. But those who endured, they passed on a knowledge greater than any battle. How to hold warmth, how to share it, how to listen to the ice without letting it in. So, tonight, wrapped in your own warmth, let your thoughts curl like steam above the coals. You carry their lessons in every blanket, in every breath that chases back the cold. You are safe by the fire. The night is long, yes, but so are the stories, and the next one waits, flickering just beyond the flame. Welcome back. Still warm, still drifting, still listening. You've heard the howling winds and the creaking ships. But now, listen to the silence. Not empty, but sacred. Because this story doesn't begin with a storm or a scream. It begins with ritual. Before the cross, before the stone churches, before paper prayers. The Norse believed in something older, something living. They believed in trees. Not just as wood, not just for burning or building, but as bridges between worlds, between gods and men, between death and whatever lay beneath it. They called it Yggdrasil, the world tree. Its branches touched the heavens, its roots tangled through hell. And somewhere, we all of us were caught in its bark. But beyond the myth, in real villages, in real forests, there were sacred groves, places where no axe touched the bark, where no voice rose above a whisper, where breath fogged the air, and even birds didn't sing. These groves were not marked on maps. They felt their way into your bones. Imagine walking into one. Snow crunching softer, the air warmer. Somehow, the trees, so tall, they vanish into cloud. Here people brought offerings. Not grand, not gilded, just honest. Goat's milk poured at the roots, a ring placed in a hollow, a strand of hair tucked beneath moss. They believed the Vitia, the land spirits, watched from between the trunks. Not gods, not monsters. Just there, ancient, patient. To enter a sacred grove, you had to ask. Not aloud, not with words, but with silence, with stillness. And if the grove answered, if the wind shifted, if the branches creaked like a door opening just for you, then maybe your wish would be heard. The high priests, the Gother, led seasonal rites. They were called sacrifices, sometimes just ale and song. Other times, a boar. A man. It was not cruelty. It was exchange. To take from the land, one must give. To speak to gods, one must offer something of value. And life was the most valuable thing of all. But most came not to give blood. They came to listen, to kneel at the tree's root, place a palm against rough bark, and feel something. Some called it memory, some called it fate. A woman named Phraides once visited a grove alone. She had lost 3 children to the fever. Her 4th, only a few days old, burned with heat. She said nothing, just held her child beneath a birch tree. Sang no words, just a hum. The baby lived, and every spring she returned, placing a carved wooden spoon at the same spot. Not as thanks, not out of debt, but as promise. To this day, in some northern woods, you may find strange objects in the roots. Coins, beads, small bowls, half full of rainwater. Don't touch them. Don't laugh. Just nod and pass quietly, because even now, some trees still remember the voices that once held. Sleep deeper now. You are held by branches older than time, and the next story waits for you on wind-carved cliffs, where the sky was watched like scripture. Yes, you're still with me, dreamer of frost and fire. So still now, so soft, the stories have carried you far, through smoke, salt, oath, and grove. And now, we climb, not a mountain, but a watchtower of the soul. You've heard of Viking ships, sleek, strong, savage, but have you ever asked, how did they find their way? No maps, no compasses, only the sky. The stars were not just pretty lights to the Norse. They were tools, teachers, timekeepers, and above all, storytellers. Each constellation, each shift of light, was a whisper from the gods. They didn't call it astronomy. They called it navigation by song, because it was taught not in scrolls, but in verses. Old men sang them to young boys on sea-rocked decks. Verses like, if the sun sleeps westward, and the gulls wheel low, hold east by the red star, and let the cold wind go. These weren't just poems. They were directions, riddles only the sea-born could solve. The Norse watched the sun's path. They watched shadows on their hands. And sometimes when the sky was hidden, they reached for sunstones, clear crystals, Iceland's spar, held at just the right angle. They revealed the sun's position through cloud and storm. As if the gods left a compass made of light, they read the flight of birds, the movement of whales, the taste of water. Sweet, land was near. Salty, keep rowing. Their ears could tell if the waves had bounced off a distant shore. Their skin felt the temperature of current shifts. And when fog swallowed the sea hole, they trusted the stars waiting behind it. One tale tells of a skald named Asgar. He was no sailor. He feared water. But one night, stranded with an injured crew on open sea, he remembered the stars, he sang. Not for comfort, but as his voice held the memory of routes he'd never walked, of constellations carved into him through story. 3 days later, they found land. Not by sail, not by chance, by song. The Norse call this deep knowing Lawanga. Not just the act of going somewhere, but the art of knowing where you are. It wasn't science. It was trust. In wind, in wave, in stars, and when you stare up at the night sky, wrapped in your blanket, wondering where you're going. Know this, they looked at those same stars, and they found home. Let the stars drift behind your eyelids now. They're light, soft, silent, still steering you forward. We have sailed far, but one last tide remains. A story not of seas or skies, but of legacy. You've been with me through storm and silence, through feasts, frost, flame, and forest. You've worn salt on your skin, dreamt beneath trees that remember your name, and followed stars older than memory. But now, dear listener, let's step into the last chamber of this long, winding hall of Norse sleep. A room filled not with fear, nor battle, nor sea, but with echoes. But in places the living would pass, near roads, by rivers, outside halls. And they always began the same way. So-and-so raised this stone, in memory of so-and-so. But they were more than memorials. They were codes, a kind of eternal breath. Each rune, not just a letter, but a symbol of sound and spirit. The rune was Thurs, the thorn, the giant, a protector, or a threat. Others say it marks the grave of a seer, buried with her prophecies unspoken. Whatever it was meant to say, it still speaks, even if no one listens. Then there are the relics. A child's wooden horse, unearthed from a bog, still carved with a smiling face. A comb made from reindeer bone, etched with spirals. A knife wrapped in linen, placed beneath floorboards, to ward off spirits or jealous neighbors. When you pick up a smooth rock on a beach, when you carve your initials in a tree, when you hum an old tune without knowing where it came from, you're part of it. Their legacy, their long, slow song. And maybe, one day, someone will find your mark and wonder what you were like and say your name, softly, like a prayer, like a rune. Let your breath slow now, as if it too is carved in stone. Steady, enduring, kind. There are just a few tailies left. Dearest dreamer, like embers glowing under thick ash. Almost there. Now, your breathing is slow, soft, like someone falling asleep beside a fire they didn't start, but needed. And these last stories, they are quiet things. Not told by warriors, not sung in great hall. These are the forgotten tailies, held by those who kept the hearth lit when the world turned cold, while the men sailed, while the swords clashed, while the saga stories thundered across cold fjords. Someone had to keep the world together. And more often than not, it was women. Not the shield maidens of myth, though they existed, but the women who waited, who held homes, raised children, healed wounds, spun wool, salted fish, and measured time with the rhythm of firewood and sun. They weren't silent. They weren't weak. They were the spine of Norse life. In every longhouse, the seat of Honorapaset, the Jarls was not for the fiercest warrior. It was for the mistress of the home. She carried the keys. Literally. A ring of iron and bronze hung from her belt, jingled with every step. Each key opened something essential. The food store, the cloth chest, the medicine box, and perhaps secrets. She managed the household like a captain commands a ship. And when the men were gone for weeks, months, years, it was her decisions that meant life or death. The distaff was her weapon, a tool for spinning flax and wool into thread, but it was also a symbol of creation, of fate, of power without noise. Midwives were honored, healers revered, and seers, women who saw through the world, were feared and followed. One woman, Ingrid of Hrafansfjord, was known to predict births by the way clouds broke at dusk. Another, Sigrun the Red, was said to have whispered a storm into silence during her husband's voyage. Even in death, women held space. Graves of noble women were filled not only with jewelry, but tools, shears, spindles, cooking stones, as if the afterlife, too, needed order. Their stories were rarely carved in stone, but you can still feel them in the wear of old ladders, the fray of preserved linen, the way a fire pit was laid. Just so, they waited, but not in stillness. They waited with work, with wisdom, with an eye on the horizon, and a hand in the dough. And when the longships did return, full of stories, silver, and swagger, it was these women who wove those tales into life, who welcomed warriors home, then told them what truly mattered had survived in their absence. So rest now, listener. Let the strength of quiet hands carry you a little longer. You are not forgotten. You are held. There are only 2 more stories waiting in the shadows. You've wandered so far, through sagas that roared, through truths that whispered, and now, in the calm beyond sound, where the veil is thin, where myth and memory blur, and what is dead does not always stay that way. In most places, the dead are buried, and that is the end. But in Viking lands, burial was only a suggestion, not always obeyed, because sometimes, if you were greedy, cruel, or simply unwilling to let go, you came back, not as ghost, not as vision, but as Draugr, the Norse undead, bodies that rose from their graves, flesh pale and bloated with seawater or rot, eyes glowing with unnatural light, their minds warped by hunger and unfinished business. Draugr weren't merely spirits, they were physical. You could hear them, feel their weight on the roof at night, smell the sea mark in the dark corner of your longhouse, hear the creak of old armures, perhaps stolen from your own chest. They came for many reasons: to guard treasure, to punish oathbreakers, to return home, only to find they'd been forgotten. And when they walked, animals fled, milk curdled, dreams turned sour. One tale speaks of a man named Holder, a warrior buried in full armor, sword across his chest. He was proud in life, too proud. He demanded his wealth be buried with him: coins, rings, even the bones of his favorite hound. The villagers warned his widow. "Burn the gold," they said. "Give it to the gods. Don't let him keep it." She didn't listen, and 3 nights after his burial, the hound came back, but wrong. Its eyes bled shadow. Its bark had no sound. Then came Holder. The doors flew open, though they were barred. The fire went out, and one by one, each coin he'd owned vanished from the widow's chest. When they exhumed the mound weeks later, Holder's body was gone, but the sword was still there, bent backward, as if something inside the earth had resisted the grave. To stop a Draugr, you had to act before burial. You placed scissors on the chest, tied the toes together, pierced the corpse with an iron spike through the heart. Sometimes, too, you salted the grave, placed a stone beneath the tongue to weigh down their words. And if one still rose, you burned the body, then scattered the ashes at sea, but never near shore, lest the tide bring them back. To this day, in some remote corners of Norway, old burial sites remain untouched, not out of respect, but out of fear, because the Norse knew death is not always the end. Not when you live a life that clings too hard to the world, not when your soul still has claws. So if you ever visit a grave where no birds sing, where the air feels heavier than it should, leave something behind, a token, a prayer, and walk away backward. Because in the Viking world, the dead are only quiet if you let them be. Close your eyes now. Brave one, let your breath be light and warm. The Draugr behind us, the fire still glows. Only one final story remains. You've wandered through sea and sky, ash and silence, shadow and flame. Now, dear dreamer, we arrive at the end. Not a violent end, not an ending at all, really. Just a final echo in a hall full of memory. And what better way to end than with firelight, feasting, and the power that lives in stories themselves. You've heard about the storms. You've tasted the salt. You've listened to whispers between the trees. But tonight, let's step inside the great hall. Out of the cold, out of the dark. Imagine it now. A long house as big as a ship turned on its side. Wood blackened by generations of fire, hides on the walls, antlers above the door, smoke curling up through a hole in the thatched roof. Not out of escape, but ritual. And at the center, always the hearth, crackling with all, throwing gold and shadow across every face. At the far end sits the Jarl. Not a king, but close enough. His cloak heavy with fox fur, his hand wrapped around a drinking horn. His eyes sharp, but kind. He knows the names of everyone in the room, even the ones pretending he doesn't. The feast is not just about food. Though there is food, roasted lamb, it's fat, crisped, pickled fish, sharp and sour, hard bread baked with ash and seed, and mead, golden, sweet, heavy, with honey and thyme. Everyone drinks. Old men, young girls, even the skald, who stands barefoot near the fire, harp slung over his back like a sword. He begins to sing. Not loudly, but with weight, his words not performed. Remembered. Tales of gods and giants, of men who sailed too far, of women who saw through time, of wolves that swallowed the moon and trees that held up the sky. Every person in the hall listens. Not just with their ears, but with their bones. Because in this world, a story isn't just something you tell, it's something you owe. Between bites and verses, men lean close, deals are whispered, oaths taken, all under firelight. Because that's the rule. If you swear something in the glow of the hearth, you are bound. The Jarl watches. He doesn't interrupt, but his silence is heavy, like a verdict waiting to happen. And as the night grows older, and the mead runs low, and the fire settles into quiet red embers, someone tells your story. Maybe it's the skald, maybe it's a cousin, maybe it's just a look in someone's eyes when they say your name. But it's there. And in that moment, you are real, not because you breathe, but because you are remembered. This was the power of the feast, to feed the body, yes, but also the spirit. To bind the living to each other, to the past, to the land, to what comes next. And when the hall finally empties, and the snow returns, and the stars blink awake, what remains is not the meat, or the song, or even the oaths. What remains is the firelight, warming the inside of your chest, long after the flame is gone. So sleep now. You have wandered through every season of Norse life, through death, and dream, myth and memory, through storm and silence. And you made it to the fire. The Jarl lifts his horn. The skald bows once, then disappears into the snow, and someone places a blanket across your shoulders. Rough wool, worn soft, smelling of smoke and safety. You are home now. Not in place, but in story. And nothing is stronger than that.